Hi everyone, so for today's demo, we're going to actually take a section of our experimental, sorry, Pickles is there, our experimental abstract works, and we are, where we were playing around with some mixed materials using a combination. We're going to actually zoom in on a section, just gonna pick a piece there, zoom in on it and enlarge it for a different, even more abstract piece, where we're trying to emulate textures, right? So learning how to use a wash in oils or acrylic and learning how to scratch into the paint and using the paint as a language rather than just plopping it on as we look at the subject or putting marks down just so that we can fill the canvas, so on and so forth. So this is very abstract, gonna kind of push your limits a little bit about what you think about composition and texture. Feel free, you can always elaborate on it, but I'm trying to edit you down for a moment so you can really look at specific relationships in your composition. Okay, so I've got some background noise. I'm gonna cut the intro short for a second and then get ready for that demo. Okay, so we're gonna go through, I'm gonna kind of give you a watercolor sketch example that I'm gonna move to oil on canvas. This could translate to acrylic. I am using, so what I did is I took a earlier watercolor study, something that I had done a while ago. And so we're talking about like cropping, zooming in so that we can create greater abstraction with our work, right? So I took a section where we don't have so much recognizable object going on, and sorry, my air conditioner is gonna pop in and out, so put on closed captioning if sometimes you can't hear what I'm saying. Anyway, I've taken a crop here, so I can't really see, like this is the edge of a pot and this is the edge of a watering can, but I've made it so zoomed in, or I've taken a section that really takes away the literal aspect of those objects, okay? So I'm gonna move that to the side. What I did, and you don't have to do this extra step, this was actually for a watercolor demo, so I have an extra one, but if you want to, you can, and you can do it in watercolor, you can do it in pencil, you can use acrylic washes, whatever you wanna do. But I reworked this composition, enlarged it, and then looked at it again through a different lens, added a little bit of collage, reinterpreted the colors, and so now I have this kind of beautiful abstract piece that's just really about wash, line, shape, and it has kind of an interesting composition because it's kind of pushed to the side. I've also got this extra negative space here. Now, when I rework it again, so you can see this kind of is centered here, I can also even push this over farther, make this shape different, okay? So what I'm asking you to do here is to think about your work it's basically we're re-examining our aesthetic, our composition, our layout, rather than just going directly to a new source every time. We're learning how to kind of analyze what it is that we're creating. We're kind of learning to dive deeper into our own work and like the layout of our work, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. But again, it's a deeper dive. It's really looking at the formal aspects of what you do and analyzing that. Okay, so I have my palette out. I've been doing some painting today. And so these colors pretty much match what I've got here. Again, when you're working abstractly, it's kind of anything goes because we're not really working from a subject. And it's more about formal interpretation than it is about really reacting to a subject, right? Again, this is really helpful. Some of you like working abstractly. Some of you are like, really like to relate to objects. I say engage with objects is the term I like to use. Both things inform each other, right? So structure helps inform abstraction, and abstraction helps inform how you paint when you're dealing with objects. So you learn how to vary your brush stroke, you learn how to think about composition, so on and so forth. Think about, I put in some of the Bay Area figure painters. Think about Devin Korn, how he worked, both methodologies, worked from life, but also from his subconscious, things like that. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of first carve out this negative space. So I'm looking at the study. It's hard to see because it's on a tan background, but my canvas is right here and it has a sienna ground on it, okay? I'm also later today going to be working from, so I'm just gonna go ahead and fill this in flat. Okay, so I did not work from the white of the canvas. My study is on a white page, but this is not, so that's gonna give me a whole different feeling here. I'm gonna go ahead and fill this in, try to kind of fill it in flat, I guess is my goal. And I did kind of push, it's not as, it's my study, this I'm pushing over for negative space. And I might just take a cloth for fun and kind of rub this in, okay? Or actually, take that back. As you can see, I have like these little hash marks that I made here in my study. So I am actually gonna flatten this out a little bit. Okay, this is my white paint. I'm using oils. So it's oils and it's white, just titanium white. And then I put a tiny bit of linseed oil in it. I have kind of a mix right here. This is also the, this is a solvent gel here. I can use that as well. That works as a medium. It also cleans your brushes a little bit, but that Gamblin solvent gel, it's a little less toxic. It doesn't have the fumes, so you can use that as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my rag to carve out lines from the white and kind of see what that does. Okay, again, I'm gonna work reductively in another painting today, okay? But this is kind of a version of, it's almost like a scratch board process, right? So I have a ground paint that I put on there. It's kind of a thin layer, and I'm digging back into it and making kind of working back into it again with a rag. You can do this with this, a tool too. You can scratch into the paint. Okay, so it works really nicely when there's already a ground, so I can kind of pull some of the darks out. Okay, if I really want some contrast, I can kind of rub it here. And like I said, this is a bit of a reductive process with a ground. When I say reductive, that means we're putting down a flat surface and kind of wiping back into it, okay? Let's see. So this is, there we go. And then I am actually going to kind of mask out, this is fun. I'll go back in with a darker color, but I like using the ground, mildly reductive, but I kind of like using the ground to make a line, right? So I'm working basically, it's almost like a wood block process where I'm carving back from the darks here. Okay. And then something up here. Again, I'm working backwards. So I had a ground and I'm using that white to kind of carve out this space. Okay. Again, I used kind of flat, thicker paint and then carved into it with the rag. I'm now gonna take kind of a bigger, softer brush. Let's see. And this time I'm gonna use a good amount of linseed oil. Stand oil can kind of help you with this too, but I'm basically gonna make the paint like a wash, okay? So now I'm using like a phthalo green and yellow that I have over here, and I'm putting so much oil or medium into this that it's gonna be real runny on the canvas, okay? And I've used kind of a, okay, So again, we're kind of playing around with it, and I will try to let it bleed on its own. But I'm playing around with thin to thick. Okay, real runny paint. And I'm gonna go ahead and, so I'm matching, I'm looking at the study and I'm trying to match the textures. Okay. And I'm gonna kind of put my rag in there and just bleed it in a little bit. So wherever I see a wash, I'm gonna also make really thin paint and kind of bleed it in, using a lot of medium. Okay. Down here is kind of this grayish. Let's see. Again, when I'm bleeding paint like this, I might actually just use a violet. So I'm kind of, again, I can reinterpret this the way I want. It doesn't have to be exact. Or here, it's kind of a wash. It's kind of a wash there. So let's see if I can get, actually if I put the violet into the phthalo green. So mixing violet into phthalo green will make me a bit of a gray color. That will work pretty well. Okay. Violet into blue-green makes a bit of a gray. It's grayish. Okay, so it's a little bit of a different gray. It's more steely than what I've got here, but it will work. Thing is I don't really want to put white in it because it doesn't help it bleed as much. Okay. There's that little yellow spot, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Little yellow spot, kind of bleeding it in. Okay. Okay, so these are just washes, kind of playing around with that wash area. There's another real light bleed. Go ahead, there. See, that paint's thin, okay? And there's another light bleed of red. Let me get the white off my paint. White off my paintbrush. Okay. There we go. And again, just really being loose. This one here actually has, like I used some salt texture because I did use watercolor there. That's going to be hard to reproduce with oil paint, but I could also put little, I could put little white blobs in it. That might work, right? So I think the main goal is to get the shape down. Okay. Get that shape down. Okay. This kind of bleeds out this way. So kind of have fun with that. And then kind of reproduce the texture. And it's not going to be so thin, but I can look at it like, maybe it's like this. There's like a spotted texture in it. So that's me looking at this and how those textures are made and kind of seeing how I can mimic or recreate it. So when we're looking at a still life or a cup, we're kind of, or a flower, we're looking at that and we're trying to mimic it, correct? You know, look at the shapes and the forms. This is different. I'm trying to mimic textures that were created. Okay, so I'm looking, still got a source, but it's a different kind of source, okay? It's a source that creates pattern, and it's a source that plays with paint on paint and things like that, okay? It's a little different approach here. It looks nice. You can see there's a couple little tiny lines in here that kind of went nicely, so I'm gonna go also and grab a small brush. Again, this will be kind of a first pass, and you get the idea. You'll want to, you know, open up your work for interpretation, but I'm going to use a little darker here, and there was kind of these little lines and textures in here. So I'm going to try to recreate that to some degree. Get a feeling. This wash is actually lighter, so I am going to have to throw a little bit of white in there. To just kind of make my values match. Yeah, lots of medium, making it kind of washy. Did change it a little bit because I had the extra ground. Okay. Here I'm gonna put on the paint maybe thicker. Okay, so right here I might put on some thick paint. Again, changing up the textures somewhat. So I'm gonna grab this, see, I call it loading up the brush. And I put a lot of paint on there. Okay. And I'm gonna just put that down nice and thick. This also gives like a whole different feeling than the washes. It looks different. It also stands out more. So when you put in paint, it gives it kind of a 3D effect when you really make it stand out like that. Looking at line and shape. And this isn't supposed to be an object anymore. It's supposed to be a shape. So we're going to kind of adhere to that. See that? That's a really interesting design element there. And I might actually just pull this back a little bit more. So it just offsets it a little nicer. Okay. Yeah, I like that green, and it's kind of funny just kind of sitting here. It's got a nice, it's an interesting shape in an interesting area. Okay. Here, yep, we'll maybe go back for those dark lines, and I'm going to keep them thick. So grab one more brush. I'm going to go back to my violet. It's kind of like a phthalo blue, and I use quinacridone magenta. And then I actually am just cross-mixing a phthalo green in it. Phthalo green. Sorry if you didn't hear me there. It's just basic, it's just kind of cross-mixing to get your kind of generic grayish or dark color. It's not exact. If you really want something that's specifically black or something like that, then you'll want to mix that. A lot of times you'll see me do that. I kind of mix the darks or the grays or the muddy color from what I've got on the palette. That is for continuity, so that I just keep so I can keep the colors closer and I'm not introducing too many new colors, okay? So I'm using quinacridone magenta, I'm using the phthalo green, and I'll use them to make my grays because that keeps the palette more harmonious. It's kind of a trick. Okay. There we go. That there. And actually, maybe here, the line in here. So I'm kind of reinterpreting this one. This is interesting what I see here. Well, I might play with a little bit of the Venetian red there. But as soon as I really lay it out, let's say, I'm gonna kind of make just line work here. That might be interesting. I'm gonna use the canvas, let the canvas show through here. But I might let this sit for a second and just see what this composition needs that's different than this, because there's a different feeling here, right? It's kind of created a new piece. This shape, again, might kind of just dig it out a little bit. There we go. And I might use, see how there's this kind of like red here, that's like a Venetian red. I might actually go in like a burnt sienna type thing, and I might actually go in with a little bit. I have some on my palette, and kind of go into the crevices with that here too. See what that does. That adds to that green. Kind of nice. Makes it more interesting, a little more dynamic. There we go. So you can see I have thin washes or things where it's just kind of this ethereal look. I have other stuff on here that is thicker, and again, I want to keep building that up. You can just kind of, basically I scoop it. You can also use your palette knife if you want. So let me show you, if you use your palette knife, you can kind of scrape. You can also pick up paint, okay? I want you to kind of play with it. See all the different things that you can do with paint and how the textures kind of sit on each other, you know? So sometimes this is gonna be a little bit slower in some ways too, where you're gonna have to put some shapes and textures down, kind of look at it, see what you want from it, you know, adjust, rework, okay? So you can see it again. When I do the palette knife, I tend to pick up the paint, put it on, and then I actually sometimes use a brush to kind of move it around. So I don't always just keep it the palette knife texture. I do kind of play with that a little bit. Okay. And again, have your rag handy because you can kind of wipe back. Okay. And rework your composition as you go a little bit. Okay. So you can see I've already changed it. Oil paint reads a little bit different than the watercolor wash is going to read. It's a little thicker. It's going to be a completely different language. I'm going to let this sit for a moment, kind of look at it. But again, I have a really good base going on here. Oh, I didn't really necessarily want to do that, but maybe we'll just bleed it in. I had more dark paint on my finger than I thought, okay? But I'm just gonna let this sit for a second, see how I like the composition, see where it's going. Again, we're kind of heavy on the dark area, so I need like more, maybe some more mid-tones through here, so I might want to adjust the color. This is looking pretty good. And then this extra, this kind of large negative space coming through here, that's kind of a fun thing. I might even want to go in and take some of that negative space or that white, let's say, and I might actually want to add some of it in here so we just can break it up a little bit, not so heavy, okay? And then maybe down in here too, again, not so heavy. So kind of looking for opportunities where we can break up the language a little bit, okay? And again, just shapes, space, brush technique, kind of looking at some of the things you might have created in a study. How can we reinterpret it? How can we get the paint on the surface to feel a little bit different? Don't worry about it looking like anything anything specific. Sometimes that can be really helpful because you're just really reacting to the paint and the canvas and the shapes and what's going on here, okay? And that, like I said, it can inform your paintings in very surprising ways. Some of you might start working this way and go, oh, okay, I don't know. I don't really know what came out of this. I'm not 100% sure. Might have to try something like this again or not. I don't know. Some of you might go, wow, okay, this is a really interesting way to paint. I was a little nervous, honestly. You might feel yourself get a little nervous because you're not sure what's supposed to be right and wrong. But again, that's really good for your, quote, painting mentality, right? Is to learn how to deal with the blank canvas in different ways, okay? So you can see, even as I'm looking at it and I'm talking to you, I'm kind of saying, oh, you know, this would be nice here. Why don't I put some extra paint? Again, thicker paint. See, I'm gonna bring it close. Thicker paint next to these washy areas is just a really nice dynamic. I feel like when you're working abstractly, you're gonna be more likely to play with a lot of that because if you're looking at a subject, this subject sometimes jurisdicts how you put the paint on the canvas. This is gonna allow you to be free and play and make some new discoveries. Okay, that's all for this section. I'm also gonna do some reductive work today and I'll cut that into this video as well. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna show you what reductive is, just real quick. Kind of defining the term reductive painting. Again, apologies for the air conditioner, it's a little bit humid today. But what I'm going to do is, this is actually a bed sheet that I stretched, so it's not a traditional canvas. I'm actually going to be using a fluid acrylic. So this is a Naphthol red. The reason I'm doing this is that it has a stain and a bleed on the canvas. It has this kind of, you're gonna see it washes down almost like watercolor. And then that way it doesn't really dry as quickly and I can kind of go in and I'm going to, so versus where I have a ground, let's say as a color, this is white, I'm going to add color and then I'm going to wipe away so that the white comes back, okay? Again, that's reduction. That's the basic definition of that. If you haven't really worked that way, if this is new to you, you can just kind of put that term or into your vocabulary. But it's very simple. It's just basically when you're drawing, instead of adding color or adding line, you're actually wiping away from the surface. So again, when somebody says reductive, that's what they mean. It's used quite often in charcoal. It's a very common charcoal technique. So you'll put the charcoal down like a ground, and then you'll take an eraser and you'll wipe back to draw into it. So the lights, the lines, so on and so forth, okay? So I'll just basically show you here. We're gonna just watch me kind of paint onto this canvas, move the camera over so you can just see more of the canvas, and then as this bleeds down. Again, it's a golden fluid acrylic. It's usually used for, a lot of times it's used for airbrushing, but I really like it for stains. And I just do this and water and a big brush. And then I'm going to basically, I'm just gonna put a tiny bit of line work into this. I'm not gonna lay out the first layer of this painting that much. I just need some marks, and sometimes I use some line work and marks to kind of get flowing with the base of the canvas, okay? Just one moment and I will be working on that right here. Okay, so a lot of times with larger canvases, I actually just prop them up on something on the floor. That way I can just kind of move up and down and I don't have to stretch so much, like, you know, get on the ladder if I have to get into the higher areas. Squirted out the paint like this, and just one of my, you know, portable plastic palettes. Again, I have a large brush and then I have a large thing of water, okay? So what I'm gonna do is you can see it's very liquidy. It's like watercolor. I probably put out more than I actually need here. And I'm going to bleed it, really bleed it onto this canvas, okay? You can see this particular, it's getting all over my floor. Beautiful part of living in your studio. So get away with that. Again, I'm kind of putting this stain right in the middle for now. I know what I'm more or less wanting to do with this composition. So I'm just going to get a middle stain area. There's going to be a few stains as I go. Okay, as you can see, there we go. Nice little stain on there. And then when I say I'm working, so I have Viva paper towels, or you can use just like a painting rag or a t-shirt. So when I say I'm working reductively, what I mean is that I'm going to go in here while it's wet. Say this is part of my composition, or I'm mapping out something, so you might be actually working on, let's see, a tree or a plant, or you're working on a face, something like that, okay? But me, I'm just need some line work in here to start. Okay, now this is really wet. It's gonna bleed down, but that's gonna be really pretty. Okay, now you can even put on the paint. If you do oil paint, it's gonna kind of stick a little bit more for you. I've got a major bleed here. Okay. But that's what reductive work is, okay? So I'm basically mapping out the situation. I have a ground, okay? And while it's wet, going in there and kind of mapping it out, okay? And again, I'm working very wet here. I want those drips. I want it to just kind of be part of the surface. If you don't want that, then you should put a little bit less water, and that way your lines will stay, okay? Again, oil and acrylic paint work differently in this regard, so it just depends on what the effect is that you want. So me, I want to get some initial line work in here, okay? That's all I want to do, and I want to let it just basically, this one's going to have kind of an abstract base, okay? So I'm just basically kind of laying out some of the surface and how the movement's going to work in here, and then later I'll get in and start really working on the forms and how the composition comes together on this one. Okay, so this one again is reacting to the base. I've got this little pattern underneath here. It's a bed shape. This is kind of an abstract work. And then I'm playing around with how this gets laid down. You can see it's already very pretty, very moody. And then I'm gonna move back in and kind of layer as I go, type thing, okay? So that's just a new technique, a new definition for you, reductive painting. That's what it is. It is putting the color down and wiping back away, okay? You can do it, like I said, in a very playful way, or you can go ahead and you can actually use it to draw. So you can like, if you have a still life, you can start mapping out like where the fruits are and things like that, okay? You're doing this, the difference between this and doing it on a ground is you're not waiting for it to dry. So if you put a ground on, so if I just put this flat and then let it dry, that's me putting a ground on my painting. But if I'm going to draw back into it while it's wet, then I'm doing reductive painting. That's the difference. Okay, little extra skill set for today. As always, thank you for joining me in the studio today, even with the dog barking. And let me know if you have any questions, and happy painting.